Hello and welcome back to Podcasting is Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm James, my pronouns are they and them.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair, my pronouns are also he and him.
And scary bad content book alert, it's Sinan.
Yes, hi. I'm back. Pronouns are they and them. And yeah, it's not good content. I promise it's going to be awful.
I deciphered what this was.
Yeah, I know what it is. Like, it's...
I deciphered what it was through like piecing together parts of screenshots that Rob was sending me to try and read the title and chapter names and stuff, and then googling it. And
is that?
I'm not looking forward to this. Yeah, that's the only reason I figured it out.
Congratulations, by the way, Sinan, on the promotion to full they them.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Was that your birthday present?
It was a bit before my birthday, but yeah, sure.
Got your pronouns in the mail.
Yeah, I finally got the signature at work with they them on it. To celebrate.
Yeah,
nice.
That's how it works. I've received mine the same way. So welcome, comrade. We meet under the docks at 9.
I was going to say mail order gender there, but it's not. Let's just get started, Rob, because there's too much of this and I want to go to bed.
Incredible vibe worse. Have you ever heard a podcast firing on no cylinders?
Well, I mean, they probably listened to the other one, Jamie, so...
I mean...
How dare you? Our work there is pristine.
Sure.
Yeah, I cut out so much stuff. Like...
Does any other podcast have anecdotes about fucking insane Italian journalists doing fertility rituals?
Well, yeah, that's true. That did happen.
This is all just, I can't believe you're just doing gross promos for a different podcast that is not related,
That's exactly it. You should subscribe to Peace at Home.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, or you can stay here and join us for this. I'm fairly confident it's going to be a double header, and that's because Don't
do that. Don't do that. Actually, go and subscribe to Peace at Home. Cancel your Podcasting is Praxis subscription so that I can stop doing this. Release me from the curse.
Do not do this. You are the only thing keeping David down.
I can assure you, you're fucking not.
If you stop paying, David is free. And quite frankly, do you want that on your conscience? Do you?
If you give David Balenciaga, he's free. That's not what's in my head.
Right, Rob. Open the fucking box.
So I have received a while ago in the post a rare. This is a rare review for this podcast because we are reviewing something that, formally speaking, isn't quite out yet. I have received a rare. What's it called again? I have
advanced copy.
Review copy.
Yeah, I have received a review copy of fine Guardian columnist Rafael Behr's new book, Politics: A Survivor's Guide: How to Stay Engaged Without Getting Enraged.
Is he the heart attack guy?
Yes, I was going to say, yes, this is the guy who blamed his heart attack on Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh, well, this is sure to be fucking useful then, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, how to survive, presumably, is have private healthcare when you have a heart attack.
600 pages of don't do what Donnie don't does.
Yeah.
He also wrote, years ago now, but he also wrote an article called And Another Thing, Shoes.
Yeah.
They are another thing. He's got with there.
Yeah. There are things, just briefly from that, there are things not to like about shoes. For example, so few of them are foot-shaped.
Why would they be? I don't understand.
Fucking hell.
No, I will not be taking questions at this time.
See, the thing is, if Adrian Childs wrote that article, it would have been totally different.
It would be delightful,
we like
for
Adrian
one.
Childs, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Is he wanting a pair of shoes like one of those, those big Hulk hands? Is he wanting like a pair of Hulk feet, essentially? Is that his ideal platonic shoe?
No, he wants those Vibram 5 fingers, the one where like they have individual...
I don't think it's platonic, he's probably going to fuck it.
I doubt it, because like this is an intensely asexual book that I've read. Like there's no vigor or passion anywhere near or around it. Large portions of this book essentially feel like I was eating like 7-year-old rice cakes or something, like something extremely flavorless and just, like just cardboard. I just felt like I was eating lots and lots of cardboard. It's sort of part memoir, part polemic, and definitely
part book for gerbils.
And certainly towards the latter half, it slips into a defense of centrism, sensible centrism as the best way forward. It is also, among these other things, a wildly elongated whine about Brexit, how people are stupid and the bad people that caused Brexit, because everything was good, essentially, before breakfast. Breakfast before Brexit.
That's usually how I start my day, just bemoaning the fact that everything after breakfast is just a chore.
This is true, though. Fundamentally, that is true.
Yeah.
Also, just as a warning for you, the listener, nothing, and I do mean nothing in this book has anything to do with material reality. Everything is just like about vibes and smart people and dumb people and propaganda and being online and Twitter. So it's just a good time, really.
Wow, it's like a fucking bingo on our podcast scorecard.
He is also, if you read between the lines, a fantastically just a bad journalist. He does one example where he says, I was invited by the Russian government to go on like a press tour and see like the free and fair elections in Chechnya. So he went, and then after that he went home because he said, well, this isn't real, nothing is real, I can't do anything here, so I'm going to quit my post in Russia and just go home to be a political columnist.
To be fair, if someone invited me to go to Chechnya, there's some chance I would go home as well. I'm not convinced I could fully hold that against him.
Yeah, but also you're not a brave truth-seeking journalist, and you're
That's
just
true.
a podcaster.
That's true, yeah.
He also, of course, manifestly absolves himself and the entire journalist class of participating in a political process, having an influence on the political process, being anything to do with, with opinion forming whatsoever. This is from a footnote later in the book. Mostly, I don't think it's useful to depict newspapers as manufacturers of prejudice. They generally exist to amplify trends. This is simply to caution against lazy left analysis that roots every defeat in media manipulation.
Which trends? Which trends do we amplify? Who makes that
existing
decision?
trends, James. Don't worry your pretty little head about it.
Pick them out of the ether, just like, oh, that's a trend, I'll put that in the paper.
Yeah, they exist. I would urge you to stop asking this question. They just exist.
I gaze into the hypercube and it tells me what is trending. Sadly, the hypercube has also just been bought by Elon Musk.
We regret to inform you that the hypercube is racist.
Also, the subtitle, "How to Stay Engaged Without Getting Enraged," is like totally fucked because you don't learn how to do that.
I'm sorry, this coming from the fucking guy who literally had a heart attack over Corbyn, like...
Yes.
Why am I taking this dude's advice? He always killed himself over a mild social democrat.
No, no. First he said that it was Brexit that did him in. He only later changed the story and said it was Corbyn that did him in.
I mean,
well, Jeremy Corbyn
but
caused Brexit, didn't he? Yeah, that's how it works.
Oh,
I mean,
damn. Yeah, of course.
If the Leave campaign had on the side of that bus, vote for Brexit and you'll give Rafael Behr a heart attack, the decision, the ultimate decision might have been a bit more lopsided.
I'm just picturing him. I'm picturing him like in front of the audience, turning the big dial, saying the cause of my heart attack, while looking back at a crowd of journalists for assurance and affirmation. Just like, great, yes.
Very, very loosely, it is structured into like 4 parts. The first is Exile. This is essentially the before time when things were good. That starts at about 1997. There's also some stuff. About some stuff in there about his own family's, relatively interesting journey from Eastern Europe and South Africa into moving into the UK and stuff. And it ends with, just some discourse, just asking questions about nationalism, about how nationalism's bad and patriotism's good. But we'll get there. Part 2, by the way, is called Hypertension. Why did things get bad? Why did we get Brexit?
Things my doctor recommends I avoid these days.
Part 3 is Revolution. Basically, it's like, look what you voted for
and
because
ways
you
to
all
avoid
stupid.
it.
It's essentially like, look at what you did, you stupids. You got red, mad, and nude on Twitter, and then you voted for Brexit, and now my cosseted comfy world is bad. And he also talks about his time as a lobby journalist, which is incredibly funny because, like I said, he is, from any practical angle, a very bad journalist. And then part 4 is perspectives, i.e., in my heart of hearts, I know centrism is the true answer, and therefore, what are the answers that centrisms provide to the many, many crises facing the UK and indeed broader Western society at this point?
That is going to be a riveting fucking chapter because it's going to say, and I know you've sort of outlined how this whole book is already going to go, Rob, but it's just going to be a whole load of nothing.
Yeah, just blank pages, right?
Yeah, I feel like we've got the benefit of the book now. I feel like we've got it. I think we can call it a job done here, yeah?
No, we cannot. Do you have any idea how long it took me to read 380 pages of this, utter trash?
Nobody asked you to do that.
Yes, the listeners did. They know. You all know. This is all your fault.
Who sent you the book anyway? I just want to talk.
The introduction to the book is actually let's knowing the few things you do know about Rafael Behr, what do you think the introduction is called? What's the title of the introduction?
How Jeremy Corbyn fucked everything.
Close. More personal.
Fuck, call me an ambulance.
Jamie's almost got it. It is
Jamie
called heart failure.
How Jeremy...
Brilliant.
No.
And speaking of fuck, call me an ambulance, that is indeed exactly where the story opens. Essentially, he goes out on a run and has a heart attack. Let me quote, "I was suffering a massive heart attack, but that's the sort of thing that only happens to other people. Besides, we had old friends coming for dinner, a fun evening. It would be preposterous to have a heart attack now. I'd already prepared the salmon."
Yeah, that's how it works.
Pure stream centrist brain, right there. That only happens to other people. Bad things don't happen to me. I am one of the chosen elect.
I can't be having a heart attack right now. That would spoil the dinner party.
Should have compromised with the heart attack, in my opinion. That's really the move.
Yeah, you get the left ventricle, I get the rest.
Yeah.
Essentially, there's some boring stuff about him going into hospital and having a heart attack, essentially. But then he's in conversation with one of his nurses post-heart attack, and he's in a hospital. And essentially she says, basic stuff like, get more exercise. And then she says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" "Journalism." "What did I write about?" "Oh, was that stressful? ... So then we get into a subchapter called Attack of the Furies, and these are the things that, among others, ended up giving Rafael Behr his heart attack. The first is...
So, can I just check the Furies? The Furies were those, mythological figures that gave out the righteous punishment for sins. So
no, the first one's Nick.
So among the things that ended up contributing to or giving Rafael Behr an actual heart attack, sadly among them is not shoes, which I would have really liked, but the first one is Brexit derangement syndrome, an affliction common among MPs who had seemed quite balanced, but who lost all sense of perspective, working themselves into hysterical lathers about leaving the EU.
It's
quite
you balanced.
He's described himself. He's described himself like he's the one who whipped himself up into such hysteria. He claimed such hysteria that he had a heart attack because of it. Like, what the fuck? I can't fucking take the premise of this book from a person who had a heart attack either over Brexit or Jeremy Corbyn or both. I genuinely can't take. We are 17 minutes into the recording on my end. I'm already fucking done with this shit. Like,
maybe the heart attack was caused by the salmon he prepared.
It's not impossible.
Yeah, he's just essentially
Say what
living
you like
inside a
about
Monty
his
Python
writing.
sketch.
Say what you like about his writing, but it takes a real skill to get that level of IMAX projection into paper form.
Basically, for poor old Raphael, there was just too much politics, and he had too much anger sloshing around in him about Brexit. And he
No
couldn't have any
fucking
more sympathy
surprise
for
the
leavers.
centrist. No fucking surprise that the centrist gets upset at democracy. Like, whether you like the outcome or not, that is just the like centrist ideology to a T. There is too much democracy. We have to get rid of it.
By the way, I would just say, if there's too much politics, don't be a political journalist. Do something else. Literally anything else. There are so many other jobs you can do. Well, maybe not
Okay,
in
but none
Rafael
of them-
Behr's case, but
None of them are possible, like, when you're completely useless.
that,
compared to,
yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like, fucking political journalist is the absolute bottom of the barrel in terms of skill needed to do a job.
I think you'll find, Jamie, that it involves having lunch with Nigel Farage, and this was actually very personally difficult for Rafael Behr.
Oh, boo fucking who?
Well, did Farage pay for it at least? I don't, you know.
No, the millionaire backer sitting beside Nigel Farage, who'd organised the meeting, paid for the for the lunch. Don't worry about it. That's fine.
That's
I-
completely
He
fine.
paid for a dunch, though.
Yeah. He was, by the way, also one of the other reasons he was getting a heart attack was that he felt politically homeless after having previously been a Labour voter, but that broke under the epic of anti-Semitism under Jeremy Corbyn.
There are no people who have had more political homes than people like Rafael Behr. That literally a political party was formed. He had the heart attack in December 2019, didn't he? So,
Yes.
like, literally by this point, there was a political party formed with the express intent of being for political journalists in the UK. It was called Change UK. In fact, it had various names. And if he gave a shit about anti-Semitism, he would have noticed that they did anti-Semitism at their launch event 2 hours before Angela Smith called people of colour, described them as having a funny tinge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he would have noticed that if he actually gave a fuck.
I mean, and also,
anytime anyone anywhere mentions politically homeless, you can't see me because of the nature of the medium we're recording on. But I assure you, I am making a dismissive wanking gesture.
and like, look, let's just take a moment and deal with the anti-Semitism thing up front, because then it's just out of the way, and then we can get on with the rest of the book. For one, for someone who spends like an entire book priding himself on being reasonable and being able to hold contradictory opinions in his own mind and picking out the best reasons as to why people do things and reading a lot of media, he never ever once investigates any of this claim about the epidemic of anti-Semitism. He just says that's true. But he does say enough, like, vague enough wordings that he says it is true, but also in such a way that, like, if Corbyn were to hire a libel lawyer over this book, you couldn't catch him on anything, because he's never specific. He just says...
None of these fucking grifters ever are. Like, it's always allusions to accusations of...
It's
something about a mural once upon a time,
a bad
and so on
vibe,
and so forth. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
felt I just didn't like the way he
Hamas
was.
sympathizers
so,
also,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they need to be that careful. I think if anyone actually genuinely got sued over the Labour anti-Semitism thing, the government would quite happily rewrite the laws in order to allow it.
Yeah, fairly sure about that. Anyway, so like the main thing is, and again, we haven't really touched on this because I don't feel we as a podcast are like super well equipped to talk about it for like a host of reasons. But what I will say in his defense, and this is one of the rare reasons I'm going to do, days I'm going to do this, I'm going to say, look, he may well have felt emotionally or reasoned into himself that there was a genuine threat coming from Labour and Corbyn as regards Jews living in the UK. I don't think there was, but maybe he felt that. But it's like, if you feel that way and you pride yourself on your reason and your logic and your big brain chair that you're sitting in, why can you not investigate any of this and it is just stated as fact? Now, we know why he didn't do that, but that's where I'm going to leave it. It's like, if you pride yourself on that much reason, then do it properly and say, these are the specific things, these are, the things that persuaded me, and then we can have a conversation. But that's, of course, not in this book.
But the short way of saying this is a journalist would make a fully fleshed out and reasoned argument.
Yes. But also, if he knows if he fleshed it out, it would be communal newspapers in coordination with communal organisations worked to generate hysteria in my community, and that's why I thought this was the case. Which may not fly.
And also which doesn't delegitimize his personal feelings. But if you're putting this kind of book out in the public domain, I do feel that you have a higher duty to be better. And especially because later on in the book...
No one's going to read it, though.
Yeah, well, one did.
Don't worry, Rob.
Were you the only review copy sent out?
I am assured I wasn't. So the reason that you know that none of this makes any fucking sense is because Boris Johnson, later on in another footnote, gets ample wiggle room for his shit, basically. Let me read you the...
that's Boris Johnson, who wrote a book called 72 Virgins, which contained many allusions to Jewish people controlling the media.
Yes. This is from another footnote. Boris's, attitude to race is not straightforward. As mayor, he affected liberal stances, even endorsing in theory, but never implementing migrant amnesty. He then goes on to say he also wrote that, the columns talking about Pekingese smiles, women wearing the burqa being letterboxes, etc. But then he goes on to say, the only way to make sense of these contradictions is that Boris could, absent other pressures, be liberal-minded about many things.
What were those pressures, Raphael?
Yeah, what were the pressures?
Do you want to expand on those? Is this anything to do with the places that he was writing these things? Could that have some implications as to the wider scope that our media occupies?
No, basically what he's saying is that in the case of Boris, it's only Boris's desire for self-advancement and seeking political glory that he turned towards racism and was fine with it. But Boris himself, Boris in a vacuum is possibly not racist because he said some nice things.
Again, this is the whole liberal thing of the quintessential essence of who you are is in no way, shape, or form connected to the terrible things you do. It's, the id of you, your very core being, is entirely separate from whatever you put out into the world.
Yeah.
So, checks out, that's fine.
So what he is essentially seeking, and this is from the introduction again, this is about Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. I imagine them colliding and cancelling each other out, two particles fired from opposing ends head-on, causing both candidates to be vaporized, a flash, a shockwave, and normal politics would be restored.
I mean, in a way, Boris Johnson was put on that pedestal by the media because he was broadly seen as one of the few things in the Conservative Party that might actually be able to land a few hits on Corbyn, politically, directly.
Yeah, and everyone else, including at The Observer and The Guardian, went along with it, seeing what kind of fucking scumbag Boris Johnson was, deciding, well, no, we'd prefer this, actually. But then, also in his personal life, this is again about the things that politics did to him. He was spending too much time on Twitter, which is bad. I mean, that's true. We all do know that. And the more I cared about politics, the worse I was as a husband and father. I was short-tempered, prickly. I shouted at my children and zoned out of conversations. He's Giles Corran, essentially, who does the same thing. Wrote that's from a Giles Corran column. So at the end of the introduction, he gives the central thesis, basically. A healthy democracy needs people in the middle, not apathetic nor activist, engaged but not fully submerged.
Oh, get absolutely fucked.
I'm sorry, I'm like, what? Why is it that activists, people who actually care about things, are dismissed? Like, journalists who merely amplify trends, they are acceptable, they are important facets of the society that we live in. But people who actually work towards achieving, like, change, they should be dismissed out of hand.
Well, yes, Alistair, you've just kind of given it away. Like, under the political hegemony we live in this, benighted isle, essentially, if you are one of the anointed, you're allowed to direct how everyone else is supposed to vote. You're not allowed to go about and try and shape that vote yourself. You're not allowed to do activism. You're just meant to, be very polite, tug your forelock, and vote the way the papers tell you to. That's it. That's the whole thing.
Voters are a lot like cicadas in that they only emerge every 4 to 5 years to fill in an X next to Conservative and then disappear again.
Yeah.
Dangerously close to an actual well-known quote about Britain there. So.
I mean, Alistair, like the Rafael Behr answer to this is like activists aren't necessarily bad, but activists have ideology, and ideology is bad because it makes you stupid.
Activists tell Rafael Behr to eat shit on Twitter, and that's why they're bad. Actually,
also that, yes,
yes, like that's what it really is, though. That's the thing. He admits himself he spends too much time on Twitter. Basically, if you want to put 2015 to 2019 down to anything, it's that these people were being told to fuck off by people who might then be in a position, for the first time in their lives, who then, if someone had won an election and had been allowed to, given enough sort of leeway to do what they wanted to do, might have been in a position to do something about it, which really would have pissed them off. Because imagine if Rafael Behr had to answer to, like, just pick any Corbynite journalist at the and if he had to answer to them,
the Corbynite journalist,
the singular Corbynite journalist, just
one. It's Michael Walker. It's all fucked.
Oh shit!
Politics changes because of the currents within this group who care enough to follow the news, but also just to get on with life. That middle tier of reasonable civic engagement is the segment I fear is being depleted and demoralized by our state of permacrisis.
Technocrats. He's describing technocrats.
I fucking hate him so much. Let's just completely eschewing the entirety of working class history. Pretty much every good thing that's ever happened in this country is because people were striking or rioting over the absolute horseshit they had to deal with. And just look to France. They are outraged at a thing that is being forced upon them. And it might, whether or not it'd be successful, well, that's another discussion, but it's certainly got more of a chance than what would happen in this fucking country today.
So it took me a while to work out what, my thesis statement on this book is, and it goes approximately as follows. This book is the UK version, the UK columnist version of the Rally to Restore Sanity. And it is about as entertaining. I think that's really the best way I have of putting this. Anyway, so let's get into some proper content. Part 1, there's a bunch of stories about his Eastern European roots. He traces some of his roots back to the Baltic states, where he is as a junior reporter. He's there right after the Soviets pull out of the Baltic states, and there's the new democracy or end of the Cold War, all that jazz. Basically, the Soviets being defeated is very good, but the Baltics still considering their Nazi collaborators as heroes is a little bad, but it's not that bad because it's all part of a healthy pickup of patriotism post-Soviets. I was happy for the Baltics that their politics was becoming more boring. Boring was good. Boring meant nationalist ferment subsiding.
Has he ever been to the Baltics? I'm sorry, I hate to be that person about it, but you can't walk 10 feet in the Baltics without seeing an Iron Cross somewhere. What do you mean nationalism has not been a thing there? Come on.
Yeah, to this guy, the phrase "banality of evil" is just get a bad dish from a fucking restaurant.
in his defense, he does say, like, you know, that some of the Baltic states, you know, making heroes out of their quite literally fash ancestors was genuinely a bad thing that upset him. Exactly, pretty much. So it's not that he doesn't notice. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. But then
he's noticed one thing. I mean, that's more than Jimmy Pesto. So
exactly. So he talks a little bit about growing up. His family moves over from South Africa. So he's like, throughout this whole like section, he sort of says there's always a tension inside me between growing up in Britain and being British, but also being Jewish and being South African in descent, so never being quite at home. And that's, in the end, what leads to a whole discourse on patriotism versus nationalism. But before he gets to that, he sets out the way, he says, this is how democracy is supposed to work, what politics is, and how it works. And the way he does that, he says he invents, Jesus fucking Christ, something he calls the inverse Clausewitz principle. Clausewitz.
What?
Yeah, I thought you might enjoy this, James. So Clausewitz is a 19th century Prussian politician general. I can't remember which one he was. And he is one of the famous quotes saying, "Politics, war is the continuation of politics through other means."
Right.
Rafael Behr, because it's the inverse Clausewitz principle, says democracy makes violence redundant as a means of settling political scores.
Does it?
Shit. Fuck off. Like, I just so I genuinely right. But you know, politics is the continuation of war by other means. You know, that's a pretty good principle, for example. Because then you got, you know, class war, etc. But no, like, this motherfucker is just like, oh well, actually, it's really good when you just surrender all power to the state and
no,
just,
you don't
like,
surrender it. You're like we all collectively buy into a system of sort of negotiated settlement between various interest groups, and because I can vote people out later and then have a chance of getting my ideas back in, I don't feel need to reach for armaments, essentially. That's the frame. It's very fucking stupid.
I mean, I get the frame, but the practical reality is just shut up and sit down. So sure, okay.
Also,
love it.
my wishes for like the end of capitalism, or, you know, an end to landlords, or, you know, a clamp down on rents is never on the fucking ballot anywhere. So what am I supposed to do in this wonderful democracy?
Also, I would like to cancel Rafael Behr. I looked up Clausewitz, and it turns out he did spend a year in the service of the Russian Empire. He wasn't just a Prussian general, so cancelled. Sorry.
Very cancelled. If he's worked for Russia, he's extremely cancelled.
Can't believe he worked for Vladimir Putin from 1812 to 1813. Cannot believe he did that.
Shocking.
And I can't believe Rafael Behr would endorse this kind of horrible imperialism. It's absolutely out of character, but I have to cancel him. I hate to do it.
So therefore, like, by an extension of this inverse principle, populism is bad because if angry people don't do liberal democracy properly, because they get mad with it, because it can be unwieldy and inefficient, and some people are always disappointed. So populism violates this inverse principle, because populists are basically, because they're stupid, they're okay with violence and exclusion.
I mean, here's the thing about, look, to be fair, he's basically presented the opposite thesis to one of the videos I'm going to do, which is populism is good, actually. But one of the things that usually has happened when populists start cropping up, like, I would suppose he would call Jeremy Corbyn a populist, right?
Oh, he roundly does.
Okay, well, there you go. I haven't read the book. I don't know. He might have just talked about right-wing populists. But the problem is that he's sort of like, oh, they're not participating in liberal democracy properly. How are they meant to do that? Where's the option for some of these people? I don't, you know, like you were saying, like, where's the option for my rent to go down through government intervention? Where's that? Where do I put the X on my ballot paper for that?
If your ideas were sensible, you would find them represented.
Yeah, you're stupid for wanting a better life, Sinan.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Yeah. I just want, like, a Caesarian-style political party that will bring in, just abolish private debt. I want that. I want that political party.
Hey,
I'm basically saying get Julius Caesar out of the grave and get him in charge of the UK. Let's do it.
However, he does admit that in all of this wonderful liberal democracy where not everybody always gets what they want and some people are disappointed, but it's not always the same people.
Yeah, who are those people? Who are these people that get what they want every time? Remind me.
Alistair, don't worry your pretty little head about that.
Do we want to go into specifics about this kind of thing?
However,
No? Okay.
However, there is a catch. There will be points where decisions must be made for the long-term health of society that make a lot of people, perhaps even the majority, unhappy in the short term.
In the short term?
Would these decisions have to do with, for example, raising interest rates or something like that? Would it maybe be along those kind of lines, perhaps?
Or the pension age or something. I'm just plucking examples out of thin air. I don't know where my thoughts are coming from. And also, anyway, I won't belabor the points. Democracies are grown up because they tolerate differences as not getting what you want, whereas populists trade in bogus simplicity, blah, blah, blah. Candidates pretend that they are the embodiment of the people's will, which is that's not populist. Never mind. There is also, by the way, an incredibly funny book in terms of his own political formation. There's an incredibly funny bit later in the book where he admits that his first ever encounter with politics as a young man was his dad taking him to see a speech by Roy Jenkins of the SDP splitters group.
With origins like that, how could you end up anywhere other than where you are?
Yeah, exactly.
Presumably everyone has the same prion disease that was at that meeting now.
So there's many pages dedicated to this really mealy-mouthed discussion on the difference between patriotism and nationalism, which can be boiled down to this. The difference between the two is conceptual, and the different concepts are important. Patriotism is about feeling the qualities of a country identified by its culture and history. Nationalism is a political project that wants the state to define those qualities and wants the government to police their expression. Patriotism is a celebration. Nationalism is a mission. You see, you see the difference? How there's no overlap between those two things ever?
It is really impressive watching someone try to just fucking limbo their way into describing what has to be described by material conditions without mentioning material conditions whatsoever.
He might as well have said patriotism is supporting the status quo. Nationalism is anything that challenges it to redefine the status quo. He might as well have just said that. It would have saved him a lot of words, but no, okay, sure.
I mean, there's also this is, by the way, this is the exact same split that the Labour Party on the Keith keeps trying to make, that they say we are a patriotic party. Whereas, nationalism, bad, because populism. Patriotism, flag, good. It really is that fucking stupid. Then we get to a chapter called Finest Hours, which I have subtitled as basically the last time my dick worked was in 1997. It was 1996 or 1997. The economy was on an upswing after a savage recession. London was buzzing with cultural optimism, creative energy, and ecstasy at the weekend. In 1996, Newsweek ran Cool Britannia on its cover.
I'm just thinking in my head, all I've got is choose life, choose a big screen TV. It's just replaying straight through.
Businesses were expanding into new markets. The internet was new and exciting. In economics, the period has been described as the Great Moderation, a phase of exceptionally low volatility. Yeah, what happened at the end of the Great Moderation? I forget.
Let's not think about any of the consequences of the actions taken in that period of history.
And also, essentially, what he finds intolerable about Britain today can only be diagnosed with reference to that glorious fin de siècle. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, if we just recreate all of the economic conditions that precipitated the events of 1997 to sometime in about 2007, then everything would be hunky-dory again, and we could just stop talking about Donald Trump, Jeremy Corbyn, Brexit, all these things that definitely have no bearing in things that happened in that period of time.
And then things get a little bit creepy. Again, it's 1997, and it's the election of Tony Blair. Why does he get in? It's because the electorate was loosened by Tony Blair's compromises with conservative opinion and lubricated with his smile.
Oh my god.
I don't like that. Don't like that phrasing at all. Not a fan of it.
Usually you have to loosen people up and lubricate them before you fuck them in the arse. So yeah, okay. Fits.
He also
like
then
a 45-minute warning for this section of the fucking podcast.
He then several times cites excerpts from Bridget Jones's diary as speaking for the nation on that day.
Are you fucking kidding?
Oh, this guy is a particular
Catherine Zeta-Jones, you are the voice of a nation.
On polling day, even the
Wasn't
weather
her,
seemed...
was it?
No, it was... what's her face? Renee Zellweger.
Catherine Zeta-Jones, you can get in there as well, fuck it.
No, she was...
What did Catherine Zeta ever do to you?
Scott Paul.
Notorious supporter of Scottish independence, Catherine Zeta-Jones. Yes, okay.
No,
cool.
I rewatched Entrapment the other day, that's why. Sorry, let me just maybe can we do some like happy music behind this? On polling day, even the weather seemed to agree that it was time for a change. The sun rose on one of those crisp spring days that cannot fail to light optimism in British hearts, trained by experience never to expect comfort from the weather. Tony Blair's anthem was "Things Can Only Get Better" by Dee Reen, a restless anthem of disposable pop exuberance. Its power to move me was out of all proportion to its limited musical merits and has survived subsequent political disappointments. Tony Blair made Labour feel like the default setting, a place to be politically neutral.
Fucking no.
That one inflicted psychic damage. Jesus.
Yeah, just political neutrality by doing things like coming down extremely hard on people who are under the age of 18, women who didn't have a partner and had a child. Yeah, if you were any of these things, you were basically the scum of the earth. Oh, let's not forget the asylum seeker madness that Tony Blair just dove headfirst into. Yeah, these
also
things are
worked
all
in collaboration
neutral.
with The Sun on a 2-week news cycle to get their new anti-migrant policy out the door.
Yeah, invading Iraq, politically neutral, actually.
And also, like in response to the previous discourse about patriotism and flags and such, the iconography of Cool Britannia seemed a cool respite from those tedious controversies. It was not a replacement for conventional pomp, but a rock and roll rebrand. It was Britpop patriotism, saluting the Union Jack as an emblem of younger metropolitan swagger.
It's genuinely exhausting to listen to.
Just trash. Like, it was one photo op in number 10, and everybody afterwards pretty much hated it. And like George Michael still had the best line that it was shit, and it was just a political like slogan. It was never a thing, and these people have like it's like 1997, the Olympics opening ceremony. It's the only things these fucking people ever remember. It's truly mind breaking. But in the background, and without liberals noticing, because they were too busy saluting the flag or something, the first like shimmerings of Brexit and a backlash against Europe was breaking out. And then essentially he says like,
fucking Tony Blair's government was like just as liable to blame shit
Brussels
on the EU. Yeah, exactly.
All the time.
Like not being able to deport as many people as they fucking want to. Like, if you take an even vaguely holistic view of the things that actually happened in that period of history, rather than just the things that give you a nice tingly feeling like fucking Cool Britannia, then it turns out this political project that you are so effusive of actually is very, very shit and is sown the seeds of the things you hate the most over the last decade.
So he does, after this, like talk about how things get out of control, you know, the discussion about migrants, you know, he says there was, he cites Enoch Powell, which of course comes before this, the post 9/11 Muslim scares and into the Brexit period and, you know, current discourse about migration. But don't worry, Theresa May specifically gets a massive pass in the middle of all this for no good fucking reason. This is in reference to that speech that she did where she said you are either a citizen of nowhere or a citizen of somewhere, and clearly, you were supposed to be a citizen of somewhere. This is him.
Yeah, better that than a rootless cosmopolitan. Sorry, no, that's the wrong language, I guess.
Yep.
This is about May's speech. I flinched at the words about citizens of nowhere. They belong to a sinister ideological tradition.
Hey, don't do that!
They belonged to a sinister ideological transition with strands on the extreme left and right. But then, don't worry about it, May's advisors assured me that those unfortunate echoes were accidental, that the speech had not been a dog whistle summons to the nastiest subsections of the Brexit voting cohort. Well...
Anyway, don't look at Nick Timothy's latest output.
Dust's hands comically.
It's all just, I am a very good special boy, and I loved it when Mummy and Daddy threw that big party, and, I try not to pay attention. They tell me they love me and that they're not breaking up and everything's fine, and just, it's all very, childlike wonder, just, rolling through all of this and going, hey, remember when things could only get better? That was so good, I loved that. I loved when things could only get better. Anyway, things got worse, and I didn't re-examine that in any way, shape, or form.
Also, I didn't examine any of the economics that underpin any of this because, it's not necessary. My life's pretty comfy.
Yeah, it's more important to be able to say it's the economy, stupid, than to understand what that means.
Yeah, and in terms of talking about giving the Tories a massive pass, it is hard to argue that Tory Euroscepticism is an exclusively racist doctrine when its enactment as a policy has coincided with so much ethnic diversity at the top of British politics.
Yeah, never mind people like Suella Braverman existing. It's just it's good to see lots of multiculturalism, specifically in this extremely tiny political elite.
I really love it when...
This is the kind of guy that thinks the race card is real, but it's used to win games of Yu-Gi-Oh!
I mean, pretty close. His argument is Priti Patel and Suella Braverman have just as much of a right to be utter monsters as old white men. And actually, it is discrete left-wing racism to ask why they don't have some allegiance to being not racist as, being people of color themselves. See, because we group people on the basis of their skin, whereas we should just allow people the freedom to, reopen concentration camps and abandoned army bases. That's actually...
he's not wrong. They do have as much right to be as big a set of monsters as old white people, and that is they fucking don't.
Yeah. And also that gives us the right to tell them they are fucking monsters. But, it doesn't work that way. That's actually our discrete left-wing racism talking. So I wish to apologize to our listeners for, us subjecting you to this.
Rafael, I'm speaking to you directly now. If you have such a big problem with racism in the Labour Party, maybe you should be asking questions like, why have they barred a bunch of black and other BAME councillors from standing for re-election? Questions like this that you may want to consider one time in your fucking life, rather than, lots of brown faces in the Conservative Party, nothing wrong there.
No, but he's considered it, Alistair, and he's come to the conclusion that they were, bad.
They were activists, not because of the colour of their skin, but because of some ineffable
ideology.
Thing
It's ideology.
Ideology, whatever the fuck that means, it's that.
Well, yeah, as you know, there are two races, white and ideological. That's it. The two races.
So at the end of this first section about his upbringing and the nationalism, patriotism, where's all this racism coming from, he does, and I'm glad to say this, he offers us the first of his many solutions to all of this, how we can come together as a nation and really get to grips with all this negativity that we've been reading so much about.
Is it we just start killing until things start to improve?
No. It's
okay.
It's a nice try. It's actually this. There is a way out of the cycle of mutually reinforcing exile. It involves all of us recognizing that none of us is getting our mythical old country back. There's a common ground in our mutual feeling of disorientation and loss. Whether that shared experience is foundation enough for a new national myth of reconciliation will depend on the narrative qualities of the politicians who want it to be true. there is a story there to be told, and I believe an audience willing to hear it.
There is none of us want an old country back. None of us on this pod want an old country back. Most of the left doesn't want an old country back. Like,
I mean, to be fair, I did call for the explicit resurrection of Julius Caesar, so I want a old country back. But
yeah, just not an old
I will
Not this
temporarily
country.
settle for the post-war consensus again.
Yeah, as like a baseline starting point. But you know,
Yeah, it's like an easing into like full communism. That would be nice.
I mean, to be fair to Julius Caesar, he did stipulate that there was like a grain handout to all of the plebs. So that's a good starting point. To be fair,
yeah, grain doll, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
On the other hand, he did christen us Great Britain, so it's a man of contrasts essentially, both good and bad.
Yeah, he
But
was
I love
the
this.
first Roman to do an expedition to Britain, came back and said, yeah, they're fucked. And they
Julius
didn't listen to
Caesar,
him.
my people cry out for freedom.
But I just love this so much. It's like, look, the thing we need to do is just like, we need to get a good politician with a good bedtime story, and then they'll just tell it, and then everything will be fine. Because we just need like a new fairy tale. And it's like, yes, narratives matter. Yes, stories matter. They do. You need to feel something. It's really basic political communication. But it's like, you also need to improve people's lives so they stop looking for a reason to, be so fucking furious all the time. Because they're not furious because of ideology. They're furious because, quite literally, their lives are turning to shit.
Yeah, stories and ideologies only matter insofar as they compel people to change how they interact with other human beings. Like, the stories he wants are all stories to get people to just quiet down and shut the fuck up, not stories that will actually get them to change things for the better in any appreciable way, even being nice to their fellow human beings. It's just not going to happen.
So we're gonna start going into, this is part 2 of the book. We'll do, I think, in terms of timing, we'll do part 2 now on the free one, and then we'll do the second half on the Patreon, so you can start paying at that point. Anyway, so this part 2 is called Hypertension, and it's about saying we lived in this wonderful world of cool Britannia, and in the pre-racism era, and everything was essentially pretty good. There were some rumblings about Brexit, but we were all living the happy life and taking ecstasy and all. Everything's good. In Hypertension, things start going bad, and more than a little bit of that has to do with Russia, which has been bad for
Oh,
a
for
really, really long
fuck's
time.
sake!
I'm really loving this latest release by Adam Curtis. It sounds fantastic. Let's go.
Can't believe Clausewitz has struck again with the Russians. Astonished.
Yeah, but what is Inverse Clausewitz up to, I ask?
Maybe he's in
anyway.
the bunker with Lenin and Hitler.
He's the guy who introduced Hitler to Lenin. I only know that scene, by the way, from that.
That's the only scene you need to know about, to be honest with you.
Yep.
No, you also need to know that Hitler killed the Romanovs.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
that's fair,
there is
yeah.
that.
That was the other pivotal moment.
Anyway, this is, speaking of the Romanovs, the opening anecdote.
One of only 2 good times Hitler had a gun.
This is him. He's done in the Baltics, and he moves to Russia to be the foreign correspondent for I don't give a shit, some paper. This is it, and he tells a story about life in Russia under Yeltsin, and things aren't going very well. And essentially, he goes to some fucking town where he encounters some low-level thugs who tell him that he needs to leave town, or else, basically, they say, we're gonna fuck you up if you're not on the next train out of here. And from that encounter and another one with a low-level thug on a train somewhere, he simply concludes, it didn't take many encounters of that kind to understand why democracy had not caught on in Russia. The experiment fizzled under Yeltsin, and then Putin took over the laboratory. Done and done.
Okay, so there's a couple of things there. One, who created the conditions for gangsters to be running most of Russia? Interesting question. Don't know if the shock therapy they imposed on the country had anything to do with that. The second thing is, there's Putin took over. America interfered in a Russian election to prevent the Communist Party from winning.
And also
that led to
get
Putin
Yeltsin into his seat in the first place. And got him re-elected.
So, all in all, I'm saying it's very funny. If Putin did intervene in the American election to get Trump elected, I'm not saying it's good, but I am saying it's very funny.
I wonder what happens if I Google the words Vladimir Putin and Tony Blair. Oh, wonder.
Yeah.
Oh, these are some interesting images that have turned up.
I do just want to say that the Communist Party of the Russian Federation are generally not great.
No,
but also, it is interesting when the intervention happened and for what reason.
So, but I'm glad you mentioned them, Sinan. Apparently, the government is now a union between gangsters and communists to steal the wealth-generating engines of Russia.
Well, what communists? What? They're not in government. They have 12 MPs in the Duma. Like, please, like, what are they doing?
And if you're wondering by now, because UK society isn't doing very well, why is the UK not Russia? That's a good question to ask. The answer radiates out from a single word: trust.
Oh my Christ.
This has just reminded me of the fact that one of the communist parties in Russia, their policy at the last Russian election was to build go-kart arenas in every town. And that is a way to rebuild trust in politics. Why is there no British party suggesting this? Apparently it was a way to deal with road rage or something. I'm like, I kind of like that a lot.
Yeah, like why can't I defeat Mike Gapes in the open marketplace of kart racing? Like, that would be great.
I mean, that would never work here because it would just cause youths to congregate.
That's true.
Yeah.
Shit, yeah.
Also, I'm calling Mike Gapes out. I challenge him to a one-on-one Formula 1 race at a track of his choosing. I will also note that I cannot drive a normal car, so...
Oh, what's that I see? It's Racer Coase driving into the side of his car.
Yeah, failing to turn the ignition.
Essentially, there's a whole bunch of pages that I'm skipping where he tries to answer the question of what happened to trust, and there's a compare and contrast thing going on. So in Russia, this is a quote again. In Russia, the absence of trust meant that the machinery of democracy was installed on soggy foundation.
That doesn't make any sense.
And if you're wondering, well, why was the foundation so soggy? And that's because socialism had taught the Russian people not to trust the government, so there was no trust to begin with, so then they did a democracy.
Well, yeah, because the government was doing stuff, and people didn't like some of that stuff.
Yeah, the reason it was bad is because no one was making a profit on that installation of mistrust, but here you can do it for profit, so, that's fine.
I wonder which had more effect on the relationship between Russian people and their government. Was it the Soviet Union, or was it the way national services were carved up, privatized, their shares kept artificially depressed in price, and then roving gangs of criminals basically bought up people's shares at pennies on the ruble, and then went ahead and jacked the price up afterwards, allowing it to actually reach its full value and consolidating the state's asset into the hands of oligarchs? I wonder which it was. I couldn't possibly say.
It's the socialism, mate.
It was the socialism.
It was the government doing stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And by contrast, in Britain, the ground is not so soggy. It's much stronger because of our long tradition of democracies.
I can't wait to do that video that I'm going to do about abolishing the monarchy.
If you want to soggy up the foundations with socialism, I know exactly a location which you can do that. And good news, it's unisex. And this is why trust is so important. Endemic mistrust hollows out politics until every statement is presumed to be a cynical deception. There's always some theatre in politics, but democracy should never be seen as pure artifice with real power out of sight, in the wings. Say, what's the last time when we tried for once to claw back some of the real power, the commanding heights of the economy, as somebody might call it? What happened when we tried? I'm really confused. What happened? No, I can't work it out. And basically, so trust is really good because in a liberal democracy, you should essentially you as the citizen, or you, Rafael Behr specifically, should be able to just trust politics and not give too much of a fuck. This is truly incredible.
The only reason this guy even vaguely begins to recognize the huge lack of trust that people have in the political system here is because of fucking Brexit. Never mind all of the things that various governments have done to literally everybody else that fall lower on the social strata than this prick does.
Well, I mean, of course not, because he's comfy, so everybody else must be as well. That's the that's the columnist's way, essentially. This is a truly incredible passage, by the way. In a healthy democracy, tuning out from politics needn't imply contempt or disillusionment. It can be an act of trust. It defers judgment to people who care more, outsourcing engagement to activists and obsessives. The unspoken assumption is that the engaged minority broadly represents the whole of society and won't wreck everything for the silent majority. He doesn't say silent, but I do. To be an episodic Democrat is to have faith in the civic culture of the nation.
Yeah, but who took a sledgehammer to the civic culture of the nation? It wasn't. Oh god, fuck! I fucking hate
It was activists and their ideology, Sinan.
Well, I'm really glad you asked this question, Sinan, because I have the answer for you, and as does Rafael Behr, because the next chapter is called "Fracking Democracy."
Oh, beautiful!
Oh my god!
Basically, this is about
not the strongest arc in Battlestar Galactica,
but. This is basically about how a series of small cliques involving Jeremy Corbyn and Brexiteers and others, ideologues basically, and Russia, exploited the cracks in our fertile democratic soil, pumped in partisan arguments, polemics, and emotive imagery, as well as fake news. And by doing so,
that is such a fucking stupid analogy. The cracks in our fertile soil. Excuse me.
It gets even dumber. By doing this, the populists and the ideologues and Russia released vents of very negative but combustible energy, which some domestic politicians like because they can use this energy for their own nefarious purposes.
What is going on here? Come on, Rafi.
The fertile baked clay bed of British democracy with its cracks venting pure methane into the atmosphere sounds about right, to be honest.
Does this get anything to do with filtering out Hitler particles or something? I'm really confused by the amount of fucking analogies going on this here.
I mean, what you basically do is you get a very healthy piece of British soil, and then you take Quadrilla, which is Russia, and then you pump in images and Facebook posts, and then out of the soil explodes the energy of ideology and Brexit, and people getting rage.
Does he actually use this analogy?
Yeah.
Uruk higher social status than you.
It's literally called, the chapter is literally called "Fracking Democracy."
Oh my god! So he's literally saying that Russia is fracking us by pumping in, a fucking shareable meme that says, "Hey, Jeremy Corbyn's good, vote for him."
Oh shit! Sorry.
Is this the sort?
Let Rafael Behr explain it. Russian troll bots sow discord because polarized societies are harder to govern, and therefore
truly Russian bots is like the clarion call of people are mad at me on the internet, and it upsets me, and I can't rationalize this any other way. It is so fucking incredible that someone who supposedly prides themselves on their ability to work things out and based on the evidence, and it turns out actually people just hate fucking condescending centrist pricks. It's a very simple line to draw.
In Britain, the most fruitful targets have been constitutional questions that resist management through representative democracy. Brexit and the Scottish independence referendum. Why else would Alex Salmond be given his own talk show on Russia Today? ?
Because he's a loudmouth dickhead who loves attention. Yeah,
multiple things can be true at once. It could be that, yes, keeping your enemies busy having internal arguments is kind of useful if you want to get on in the world, right? If they're busy arguing among themselves, then they're less likely to get in your way. But it can also be true that the trick to doing this is to take arguments they're already having and just, hand them a microphone. It doesn't have to be ginned up wholesale. It's Like, the whole idea with Alex Salmond, it's like, yeah, people were talking about Scottish independence. Russia Today gave him a talk show. They gave him a talk show because, yes, it helps like make that debate louder and have a bigger discussion. That doesn't mean they invented the cause of Scottish independence. It doesn't mean they invented Alex Salmond, unfortunately.
Yeah,
The
cause of Scottish independence was probably invented in like the 13th century at this point. So, and again, could have been Russia. We don't know.
It was invented exactly 1 second after the Declaration of Arbroath was signed. Like, you know.
Wait till this guy hears about.
No, that's enough.
All right.
No, we're closing this fucking door.
Wait till this guy hears about a little American agency called the CIA and the shit that they get up to. Holy fuck.
So sorry, give me 1 second.
I do want to say the CIA did one very cool thing, which was attempt to make Sukarno look bald and like he was having affairs when everyone knew he was doing both of those things. So good job, CIA.
Oh, yeah, the CIA getting very mad that Castro kept seducing all of the assassins.
So basically, because of the fracking of, and he doesn't, it's not mono, right? He doesn't just blame Russia. He says, other people did the same, dumb commies, vote leave, all that jazz, like bad people did that stuff, basically. So because of all of this, and I hate to tell you about this, the UK has become a polarized society. And what that means is people.
It means that they are vaguely aware that there are various interests that are at loggerheads with each other, but until this very moment, they haven't realised it because they are in the very comfortable top end of that particular conflict.
No, it's actually worse because like more people, because they've been radicalized by ideology, they have like a defined moral sense of what politics like ought to be and what it should be for, and these are what he called sacred views, which cannot be transgressed, and if you do, then like you will not respond with logic and reason, but with your angry heart.
The woke mob, the woke mob.
Yeah,
okay.
It's like
we are about to get into the woke mob.
You might say that human rights are sacred, but what you need to realise is that this is a stupid view, and actually it's very pragmatic that we, torch the poor, or like ship people to Rwanda, or tear up trans rights. Like, that's what he's arguing about, surely. Go on, Rob, tell us. Tell me I'm wrong.
He explains it a little bit. Some might vote Labour because they prefer the party on balance, the look of its leader or some particular policy. That is a loose allegiance. Someone wearing a never kissed Tory t-shirt isn't that. To them, being Labour is sacred. You see the difference?
Fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to wear that shirt.
Yeah. You might be a bit surprised by how that plays out.
And it gets worse. That's because social media has a way of intensifying views into this zone where dissent is perceived as an existential threat. Social media sacralizes all of politics.
He's just so upset about the people calling him the fucking prick on Twitter. It's great.
Real, I'm doing my part hours.
And basically, like on top of everything else, and this didn't help with the fracking of democracy, we invented social media, but we didn't really understand its power, and then we wired our troglodyte clicking brains up to democracy, and democracy is essentially can't handle that kind of jazz.
Shut the fuck up.
And the worst result, the worst of all of this is sometimes now people yell in the street at Michael Gove or Keith, and they call him a clean shirt to his face, and that just shows that politics is out of control. If somebody yells,
this cunt wrote this fucking book.
Yeah, because no one in Britain has ever yelled at a politician before. Like that's never happened.
Remind me again what MPs it were that was killed after during a certain referendum.
No, don't worry.
Not going to interrogate that at all. No. Oh,
he does later on in the book talk about. He does talk about the assassinations of Joe Cox and stuff, but not in not really in a serious way. If I'm fairly honest with you. Basically, social media has turbocharged. Let me try that again. social media has turbocharged our separation from representative democracy as it ought to work. And the most lethal side effect of this frack democracy is the entrenchment of a them and us politics, where the system can only function on... No, where the system can only function on the understanding that they are us.
No!
No, yeah, you lost it there.
What, right, make your fucking mind up. Are human rights, like, fucking sacred and infallible, or actually are... Oh, fuck off. I can't deal with this cunt, this fucking doublethink.
I think what he's trying to say is that the tap water of democracy is like a light with the fire of people or some shit.
Uruk high in his own farts.
But yeah, it's like he's basically saying, look, the sham of democracy only works if you identify with your representative and consider them like one of you and a good like representative of you, and if you believe in the myth of mobility, etc., etc. As soon as you start to go, hang on, this game's rigged, suddenly you won't play anymore, and we can't have that.
No, because then you suffer from
democracy is the
James.
continuation of kayfabe by other means.
Yeah, democracy was great until these fucking voters turned up.
David, is that what you'd call the inverse McMahon principle, or are we ready for your book?
No, the inverse Saruman principle.
So basically, now that our democracies have been fracked by Russia and ideology and all that stuff, and social media, of course, we have become off balance. And that's basically a problem for the ideal subject of a representative democracy, which, if you're curious, those are the people who can hold opposing views in their head and acknowledge the partial merits in nearly every position. So they're sort of like, there's you, the stupid ideologue, and then there's the superior brain chair people, like Rafael Behr, who can observe all realities and say, you are right there, but you are right there. And have you thought about a synthesis of some variety? He can do that. Not everybody can, but he can.
Yeah, he can view all worlds except for the ones in which we inhabit, where economic conditions cause us to careen from crisis to crisis, like on an almost decadely basis.
I think what you're saying is like, well, the socialists are looking for British jobs for British workers, and meanwhile the fascists are making the trains run on time. So maybe some kind of synthesis of these two will lead us to a politics we can get.
No, neither of those, because then you have ideology again, James.
Oh, right.
I've warned you about having ideology. Raphael's warned you time and time again not to have ideologies. It's bad.
My only thought here is that the synthesis of those two things is driving trains into British workers.
This feels like I'm in the re-education camp, and like Rob is taking us through like a presentation to de-radicalise us.
Yeah, sentenced to hard labour at the centrist work camp.
And social media has made it much harder to be like the perfect brain chair guy, and even harder to be a journalist. That's because pylons happen now, and that's bad because
I hate when people can hold me to account for my own words.
Yeah.
Like, look,
before the invention of social media, nobody told him he was a thundering fucking dunce on a daily basis.
Look,
and
all
now
I'd
they
say
do,
is,
and that can only be the fault of the Mysterons or some shit.
all I'd say is, as someone who has had to read lots and lots of different things about this exact issue, just don't post on a public forum. Just shut the fuck up. It's that simple.
I know. I was thinking back about to our latest episode with Mick. It's like you could just not have a Twitter account. It's perfectly possible. You can be a journalist and not have one. It's fine. Yeah. It's even easier when you're a fucking columnist to not have one.
What to do is, right, pay $10, go to the UK mega thread and something awful, just post there. Less people will shout at you, I promise.
I thought you were going to say go to the UK Margaret, which is a thing from the stream that's been out in my brain for ages. I just can't get it out of my brain.
And
I've been addled by the YouTube zone.
Pylons are incredibly bad, and especially for journalists and brain chair people. That's because every moment of hesitation, wondering whether or not it's really worth the hassle of being, piled on, is a step towards self-censorship. Digital vigilantism works by raising the cost to journalists and institutions of expressing certain views.
Yeah, bullying works.
Yes.
That's an opinion I've long held. You know what I mean? Thank you for the support.
Pylons are bad. Okay, did a Zergling write this?
So then we get a very specific example of censorship and too much liberalism, too much posting and too much anxiety. Now, what do you think he picks as an example of when things get too vicious online and in person? What would be a bad thing?
Call him Rafael Behr.
Did someone quote tweet him with the words "this you"?
No, I'm afraid not. It's a bit more pedestrian. I think is at this point.
I was going to say
someone posted shoes at him.
Well, I was going to say whether someone Brendaned him, but I'm sure now.
So as an example of whether or not we are truly free to express ourselves and be ourselves online and in person, he of course brings up J.K. Rowling and trans issues.
Oh my god!
Oh my fucking god!
Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequence. Jesus fucking Christ!
That's another person who needs to shut the fuck up. J.K. Rowling.
Now, the problem is, look, the problem is of course both sides because they have too much ideology. The people arguing just don't see that common ground. Let me quote.
There is no common fucking ground, you thundering cunt!
Yes,
there's
the common ground between...
People on both sides would quite like Rafael Behr to eat their fucking ring piece.
You can't have common ground between one group that says we think you should be eliminated and another group that says we do not want to be eliminated. There is no middle ground there.
I think the Communist Party of Germany was very unreasonable in not seeking common ground with the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Don't look into who that is.
Look, Sinan, they have the word socialist right there in the title.
Oh god, yeah. Fuck, I should have said that.
Me for my next column. I'm ghostwriting Christopher Hitchens these days. Anyway.
Yeah, Rafael Behr's next fucking article. Why I'm voting for Zentrum.
Don't mind how Zentrum voted in the Enabling Act. It's all part of the long game.
Anyway.
It's all part of the long game to ensure centrism is supreme.
I mean, if you
The debates get so vicious because both sides derive their claim to moral authority from the liberal tradition of protecting vulnerable groups. They are competing for the same high ground, but from different angles. Both sides can be right. The political task should be to calmly refine arguments until the precise points of disagreement reveal themselves. Then consider how to bridge the gaps as they appear in policies. One such
there
area
is no gap that can be bridged.
The only high ground I want to claim is the grassy fucking knoll.
It's the dojo of ideas and debate, but like the dojo was fucking designed by MC Escher.
One such area is sport, as being born male gives you more muscular structure and therefore the competition will be unfair.
Biotruths, let's go.
Another one is physical vulnerability in single-sex spaces, especially prisons and women's shelters. So, there's a lot of common ground to be found there, I assume. I haven't looked into this. I've just hit myself with a big hammer again. However,
can I have a go with the hammer?
Form an orderly queue.
However, this is the fortunate thing for J.K. Rowling in particular. She had the celebrity status to resist the pylons, but those were sadly not available to Kathleen Stock, who didn't have the celebrity resilience necessary to get through. And her being told to get the fuck out and not be such a massive transphobe was almost the same as censorship, because cultural structures, like pro-trans voices, can operate in an authoritarian mode. A socially enforced demand for obedience to intellectual doctrine is aggressively and illiberally censorious.
It's actually not a demand
It's
for
really
obedience. It's just shut the fuck up. Just stop being a transphobe, or just shut the fuck up. It's not like that. Isn't I don't think this is a rare case where someone's actually explained what they think is being censored, and it turns out what they think is being censored is being a cunt.
Yeah,
and like just shut the fuck up, dude. It's easy. It's super easy.
It's back to that whole thing we've got going, where it's like, you know, who they are is separate from what they do, right? And we don't actually give a shit about who they are. We care about what they do. And so from our perspective, we just want them to shut the fuck up. They can be internally transphobic if they want, but just shut the fuck up and don't make it anyone's problem. From their perspective, we are against the very essence of their being. And, you know, we want to, like, we demand, like, groupthink and right thought and all that kind of shit from them, which is not the case. But it's just like their entire interpretation of the world hinges on this idea that they can just do whatever they want, and that doesn't truly reflect who they are. So the idea of getting pushback for doing what they want is anathema to them, and like an intolerable, like, you know, imposition on their rights to be a cunt.
So
raising my hand here to just say I was saying groupthink and right thought.
And also for me, like, what's so fucking painful about all this, apart from the entire discourse and him just being like cataleptically stupid and clearly only reading like fucking Hadley Freeman columns, is like the problem that a lot of people, including the students who chased her out of the university, had with Kathleen Stock was her incredibly shitty scholarship that, you know, we see now that, you know, when people shoot up LGBT nightclubs in the US, you know, the shooters cite that, and the extreme Christian right, who just outright says, no, trans people just shouldn't live, also cite that book. And it also doesn't engage with the fact that, like, there have been many, many critiques of that book by, you know, serious scholars who've said, no, what she's doing is incredibly shitty scholarship and doesn't, you know, this is not academic work, this is just polemic bullshit. So, but that's, none of that is taken into account.
Can we also just add the fact that Kathleen Stock wasn't hounded out? She resigned.
She quit. Yeah.
She quit willingly so that she could get on the fucking I've been cancelled by the woke mob fucking grift train to do all the fucking typical rounds that every one of these cunts does for being cancelled and therefore getting onto multiple national platforms, which is, of course, what censoriousness results in.
Yeah. Anyway, so basically, because a lot of us have become stupid due to being online and democracy fracking and being part of Twitter pylon mobs, etc., a lot of us are no longer capable of nobly holding several points of view at the same time and like picking the best bits out of it. That's very
Rafael Behr really said the internet makes you stupid.
Close as it, yeah.
Rafael Low-Tax Behr.
But then he begins like the next chapter. This is the last one we'll do before we switch over to the Patreon. Speaking of people being fucking stupid and a bad journalist, this is like the first like anecdote that opens this chapter. He's talking about the Iraq War and WMDs. A spy I will call Mark once explained to me how a war begins with bureaucracy. So essentially what the spy called Mark says is, look, the dodgy dossier that hyped up the claims in the 45 minutes to get a missile into London from Iraq, it wasn't dodgy, it wasn't manipulated, it was just layers of bureaucracy pleasing each other. Like, the refugee wanting asylum in the UK is encouraged to tell a story about WNDs because that'll get him in the country quicker. The agent is encouraged to give that story to a supervisor because that'll get him a promotion quicker, and so on and so forth, until, you're not lying, you're just incentivized to do certain things.
Hey, who put this structure around all of this racism?
So this is that fucking incredible. To this day, Tony Blair insists that he didn't lie about weapons of mass destruction. Not deliberately, he sincerely expected them to be found. My man Mark agrees. Mark works for the non-proliferation department of one of the UK's intelligence services. Now, why would a spy working for the UK's intelligence services talk to a journalist and say, look,
this was all just an innocent mistake. Don't believe your lying eyes or, the well-known stories about Alistair Campbell massaging the dossier. Don't look too much into the suicide of Dr. David Kelly. It's fine. Look, it's just, this is how bureaucracies work. That's oopsie doopsie, and sometimes you end up in a war and you kill like a couple 100,000 civilians. It's just because bureaucracy, basically. That's just,
If the purpose of a system is what it does, maybe this system in particular is designed to just kill brown people. Who's to say?
So this dynamic of like layers of people trying to please each other, leading to bad outcomes, that's repeated in places, and then we get into another incredible citation. This dynamic of pleasing each other is repeated in most big organizations. It happens in business as much as in politics. A marketing department might find ways to promote petroleum-flavored crisps or wearable yogurt, but the customer who doesn't want to buy them is always right. A government that has convinced itself to do something that won't work should be set right during an election. Voters, given a free and fair chance to express themselves, can put a limit on ideological excesses.
Can they now?
Oh my god.
See, you wanting to vote against rent increases is, you don't have that option, and that's because that option is essentially like wearable yogurt. I don't even know what the fuck this is. Like, it's like in the free marketplace of ideas, why don't you just vote for an alternative? It's like, there isn't one. In terms of the basics...
Yeah, let's not forget that this is a deliberate political outcome that the political elite, excuse me, that the political elite and the media have worked hand in glove, tirelessly to create, to make it so that there is no so that there is nowhere else for you to go, as certain people in the Labour Party might say.
So this is essentially because you have this real choice between wanting or not wanting to eat petrol-flavored crisps, which I guess is the same as not voting for the Labour Party or voting for Nick Clegg or something, I guess. That's why democracy is better, because it allows voters to do away with ideologies that don't work. And that's why we don't have capitalism anymore.
I mean, on the point of doing away with ideologies that don't work, this is kind of in a an actual piece of data for Rafael Behr to consider. What happened to the Lib Dems between 2010 and 2015 and onwards? Where would they be now without pledging to keep student fees at their current rate and or abolish them? Where might they have ended up?
And also, I love it when my democracy has pure and absolute free choices. Hey, let's ask someone like Salvador Allende or Patrice Lumumba how that works out when you have really free choices. When your choices are truly free in a free democracy. Let's see how did it go with them? I think very well. So essentially, that's the problem we have with. So this is good. Like, getting a free choice for wearable yogurt is good. That's liberal democracy. The bad thing is people being ideologues. That's because ideology is someone whose theory collides with reality, and then they demand reality step aside. It creates perverse incentives.
That's when you make UKIP guys wear yogurt on the street.
Wearable yogurt. Yep.
And also, as pure aside, even though they weren't functionally truly on the ballot everywhere, UKIP has dragged the whole national conversation in its own direction for the last decade or more.
Yeah.
All this fucking shit is basically proving the whole premise that Noam Chomsky wrote about, where it's essentially you constrain debate to a limited choice of options, but allow there to be vigorous and loud debate within that range of acceptable options, and that way people are given the illusion of choice. And
is that some kind of choice that I can see out of my window of some variety?
Man, I don't know. It's just very depressing. Where he's like, look, everything within these bounds is okay, and you're allowed to have multiple opinions at once and try and come to some kind of synthesis. But if it's beyond these bounds, then it's ideology and it's bad. So fuck off. Just...
So yeah,
I don't know who this book's for. I don't know who this book's for.
People in the Guardian column section, and presumably other columnists. And people at the New Statesman. It's a very New Statesman book. This.
No, it's for depraved human beings like us. And our entire ecosystem.
They're writing these now because they know we'll read them.
There's a huge audience. You might not have heard of them. They're called left-wing podcasters, and they can't get enough of this absolute dog shit.
Yeah, thank you for the review copy. Ideology creates perverse incentives for people to double down on mistakes and rationalize irrational choices. One word for that is stupid. Basically, people who have ideology are stupid. That's why in a dictatorship you have more ideology because more stupid. Because it's demanded of you because you're not allowed to do facts and logic in a dictatorship. So the stupefying power of ideology doesn't even require everyone in the system to be passionate about it or to have even read the founding texts. You just need to know how to suck up, which that would never happen in our noble democracy, of course. Hey, what are all these spads doing in my safe seat? I don't understand this at all.
I mean, it really isn't a surprise that this guy doesn't like the idea, like the concept of ideology, when having an ideology does require you to have some degree of principle.
Yeah, but principles are not cool, because then if you have a principle, you can't hold several ideas in your mind and then pick out the best bits of it, because then...
Oh, I've got several ideas of what could happen to Raffi.
All right, just hold them all in your brain, rotate them a bit upside down, and then see what the best bits are. So basically, I'm skipping a whole bunch of pages again. It's a small step from having ideology to becoming a troll online, and becoming a troll because trolls online do discourse policing, which is what ideologists do instead of rationalists. And that is something discourse policing is, of course, that's something that George Orwell warned us about. Thought crime
oh my fucking god!
I really hate how this man has men like him have denigrated the noble troll. From such humble beginnings, they've truly transcended all levels of expectation that any of us ever had for them.
Thought crime is stupefaction to which the radical left is particularly vulnerable. In the 20th century, this was applied to class. Today, it is more commonly used to police discourse on race and gender identity.
These things are the same! Oh my god!
It also, that kind of trolling. Trolling, by the way, also creates the illiberal safe spaces language, which got Kathleen Stocker and J.K. Rowling cancelled, apparently. That's... don't ask any questions. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But, once again, the left is very bad. I think we can all agree on this now. But it's not...
Yes.
The right is just... is as bad, but maybe not as bad. That's because, anti-woke politics is reds under the bed and cynical diversion. But there's also dogmatic politics that is influential in policing debates in liberal and left circles. So, the right
Truly.
is bad, but they have a point.
Yeah, truly spoken like a Zentrum voter.
The right wing is standing there going, listen, we should genocide everyone that we don't like, particularly those who aren't white. But, you have to admit that you guys also have common views as well. You guys all believe in human rights together. What's up with that? It's very... I never stop getting depressed at how these liberal commentators are able to kind of look from one to the other and not spot the qualitative difference in, one side wants to murder people and the other side wants everyone to live, just decent lives regardless of skin colour, sexual orientation, gender, any of the rest of it.
Anyway,
are we done, Rob? Is this
This
section
is.
done
I'll
yet?
read you one more quote, and then we're done with the free part. And then, for anybody who still has the will to live, you can keep on listening to the second part, which is on the Patreon. So, the right way to be left. You see, we did that's a little funny writing. The
Whoa.
right way to left.
This is why you go to public school.
The right way to be left emerges organically and is enforced informally. The alt-left draws its energy from a young, educated middle class. This might explain why it prefers battles over race, gender and identity as opposed to the proletarian emancipation of the 20th century.
Oh, shut the fuck up and just apply for the fucking Communist Party of Britain, you prick.
But what if these struggles were connected in some fashion? What if that? What if issues of race and gender and so on were related to the proletarian struggle? What then?
I don't think
what
that.
would we say then?
This is the
can't
first I'm
possibly
hearing
be
of
true.
it.
What if I...
Well,
Everyone knows you can't be like woke and have an actual trade job. You can't be a woman and be an electrician. You can't be brown and, like, I don't know, work in a factory. Like, you know, you're not allowed to be multiple things. So, you know, you start your life as a worker and then one day you decide, I think I'm going to go woke, and like some immutable characteristic of yourself being changes, and from that point on you don't work anymore and you get paid benefits. That's how it works.
No, sorry, James. Like, if you're a worker, you're not the young, educated middle class. These things are very separate. There's no. It doesn't work that way. And you know, if you'd gone to university, you would have gone.
Yeah, you too could end up being a barista working in for like barely above minimum wage and unable to afford your rent, like the elite middle class piece of shit that you are.
Yeah. Like the elite shit poster you are. Anyway,
All right,
so.
no notes.
That is, and on that note, I think we will end here. Our first, you will get the intermission and us, you know, pointing to the big sign with the pound on it. This is part 1 of our part 2 review of Rafael Behr's truly atrocious book. But may I encourage you to stay, because in parts 3 and 4, we've set up all the dominoes. There is Russia, there is people being stupid, there is ideology, there's some other stuff in the economy, but don't worry your pretty little head about it. And now in parts 3 and 4, the whole edifice comes crumbling down and the worst event in the world happens. Brexit. And then some other shit happens, and it's all bad, but don't worry about it. At the end of the next part, I will give you, out of the review copy that I have, Rafael Behr's solutions, how you too can stay engaged without getting enraged. So see you on the Patreon.
Bye for now.
Hate you.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye for now.
Don't sub, I want to be free.
So...